David Ulevitch, co-founder of American Dynamism. Welcome to We the Builders.
The American Dynamism is just like the American dream. It doesn't just exist in America. It exists everywhere. Everybody wants to be Tony Stark.
The people who are first to market don't really win. People who define the market, give it language, usually.
Totally. Like frontier tech and hard tech and deep tech, those are not good terms. It's hard to get excited about deep tech. If you want America to have the best technology, hardware has to be a component of it. We're going to win through American ingenuity. Now it's a good time for American Dynamism. And I think we're just still beginning.
David Ulevitch, you are the co-founder of American Dynamism, and you're general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Welcome to We the Builders.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, thanks for having me. We're at your office.
That's true. We are. We do have a podcast room here, so I think we should use it.
Well, I can trace back. I've asked this question to a lot of our probably mutual friends on the show, on the podcast, on what was the inflection point where all of tech became hardware and defense pilled. And so late 22 is when I got pilled because, we were in pre-crypto, pre-SBF fiasco, and I just couldn't make sense of a lot of deals and companies in the space. And so I was like, wait, I read Power Law by Sebastian Melby, and I was like, wait, the roots of Silicon Valley were completely different. We had defense money coming in, and it was all focused on hardware. And what happened? Maybe that is where, we should focus. And so I just started finding more niche groups back then who were focused on this. But what happened the following year was some firms started hiring defense-focused partners who hadn't done defense ever. And this term started emerging on the timeline, American Dynamism, not even from Andreessen. It just became like popular way to describe, investing in frontier tech, investing in defense tech. And you've basically coined the phrase. So I want to go back behind the scenes. How do you come up with a term, a language to describe a movement that's so sticky?
Yeah. Well, there's never one moment where I think I realized that this is what I wanted to do and what we should be doing and what needed to happen. I think it's been a crescendo that's built up over many, many years. I was an executive at Cisco, and at the time we ran the largest hardware firewall business in the world. And that was the first time I'd ever had anything to do with hardware or a bomb of parts and requirements that you needed for hardware, and then learning about all the things that go into that, and then finding out that there's this other company, Broadcom, that makes the chips that go onto the PCBs that you build, and you're totally dependent on Broadcom, which used to be called Avago. And like you just find out that the entire supply chain to even make a hardware firewall is so complicated, and you have to think so far in advance. And then we had this competitor at Cisco called Huawei, and they could ship things very, very quickly, and they could compete on price in a way that we couldn't compete. And so at Cisco, as my first time, I got experience with hardware, and I realized that hardware is very, very hard, and you need a certain kind of person to develop and build those products, and who doesn't think in the agile software methodology, but thinks in a true waterfall methodology of you need these chips, and the supply chain for these chips is 18 months out, and then they need to go onto a PCB, and then they need to get tested, and then they need to fit into this form factor, they need to have these kinds of thermal requirements, and it's just like the list of requirements and dependencies for hardware just gets very, very challenging. So I got exposed to that and realized, wait a minute, if you want America to have the best technology, hardware has to be a component of it. If you want America to have technical dominance, you need hardware to be a component of it. Software is cool, but at the end of the day, we live in a physical world and hardware matters. So that was like maybe the first taste of it. And then on the competitive front, we were competing with Huawei on a global scale, and it was very hard to compete with them. They had financial incentives for the customers that American companies couldn't compete with, because they would come in with financing from Chinese banks that were, interest-free for 30 or 40 years. And it's like, well, that's like free money. So can't compete with that. And I just realized that we had an economic competition that I felt like we were losing. And then I realized that all the parts that we were sourcing for our products were coming from overseas, and we had those dependencies. And so when I left Cisco and joined Andreessen Horowitz, I knew I wanted to spend my time doing something bigger. About a year after I joined, Mark introduced me to Palmer Luckey, and Palmer Luckey was the founder of Oculus, which was a hardware company that was really a pioneer in the VR space and really trying to make VR cool. And Meta, Facebook at the time, Meta had bought Oculus. And, and I think we realized there that like hardware is such a foundational component of all the experiences we have. And he was somebody who really focused on integrating advanced software with hardware. And that was really an important moment. But at the same time, elsewhere in Silicon Valley, Google employees had protested this idea of working on something called Project Maven, which was actually a software tool to give the Pentagon the best advanced AI capabilities, computer vision capabilities, AI reasoning and analysis capabilities. And people didn't want to work on that stuff. And you're right. Go ahead.
There was a protest. Yeah,
there was a protest. Yeah. And it was crazy to me. And I didn't even, I knew the history and the roots of Silicon Valley, and even like Stanford and all these things were rooted in the semiconductor industry, were rooted around supporting the defense industrial base. Yeah. But it was just crazy to me, irrespective of your politics, this idea is like, don't you want the men and women who serve our country to have the best software and best technology? Like, do you want them to be using like the oldest, crappiest version of Microsoft Outlook? Or do you want them to have like the best and most modern software? And do you want them to have, even things as simple as like autocomplete when you're like, and like spell checking and things like these are things that are important. And it's like, don't you just want them to have the best capabilities? Forget weapons and all those things. We can talk about that. But like, don't you just at a fundamental level want the people on the front lines and our first responders and law enforcement and public safety and the men and women who serve our country, don't you just want them to have the best tools to protect the most number of lives and to have the most analysis, most intelligence, most precision? That's what I thought. And I thought it was crazy that people just didn't agree with that. And I felt like people weren't talking about it enough. And if you just made the claim or made the point, shouldn't those people have the best technology? Almost all Americans would agree. Yes, they should have it. But in order to do that, you have to invest in those things, and you have to invest in companies that believe that also. And if Google was going to lose their way and not support Project Maven, which they had bailed out of, then it was incumbent on venture capitalists who start in investing companies and help start companies to invest in companies that believed in those things. So I met my partner, Katherine. This is like a very long answer to a simple question, but like, I met my partner, Katherine, and she was putting to words a lot of the things I believed.
And she was a general catalyst at the time.
She was a general catalyst at the time, which today does do a lot of American Dynamism investing. But at the time, it was very controversial and frustrating for her. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I know that it was frustrating and an uphill battle to get any deal over the line. And I finally just, after I met her and we got to know each other, we met during the Series B of Anduril, which we had to split because we were both competing for it. So we were competitors. I just said, look, we should join forces and make this a full-fledged effort. Mark and Ben are so supportive of these ideas that we have. And we can build a practice around this, build a fund, build a movement, and get people fired up about this. And then this starts in 2019, and then she joined in 2021, and we launched the American Dynamism practice in 2022. But like, it really takes years to build that crescendo. And now there are all kinds of tailwinds. People saw with COVID, the supply chain interruption. People see with the conflicts in the Middle East that we have to rebuild the arsenal of democracy. People see with the fight in Ukraine that the fight of the future looks different, that drones are changing the way we think of warfare, that mass attritable systems are changing the way we think of fights that might happen in the Indo-Pacific region. And so the tailwinds are very strong. We have an insatiable thirst for energy. We need more power, more energy across the United States. We need a more reliable grid. We need more data centers. We need all these things. So now it's a good time for American Dynamism. And I think we're just still beginning.
Well, you mentioned like it became a movement, and then you raised the fund after that. This is this friend of the podcast, what he describes this as category design. Christopher Lochhead, I don't know if you've heard of him. He came up with this concept of category design where the people who are first to market don't really win. People who define the market give it language, usually.
Totally. Like frontier tech and hard tech and deep tech.
It's been around.
Right. They've been around, but like those are not good terms. It's hard to get excited about deep tech.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Hard tech sounds hard. I don't want to do hard tech, And
there are all these terms around.
Yeah, there's all these terms around, but I don't think they actually meant anything. Yeah. To me, like if you talk to an LP, frontier tech sounded like you'll never make money. like it's so far in the future that either it's like scientifically impossible, it's commercially unfeasible, and sometimes LPs will do it just to have like a small allocation and a diversified strategy, but like they didn't expect to make a lot of money. But now when you talk about American Dynamism, we actually are really bringing advanced technology to the market very quickly. So bringing it to a customer, and oftentimes in our case, educating the customer, educating the Department of War, educating the legislators in Congress, educating the international community on why they need to focus on really rebuilding what we call, the arsenal of freedom, the arsenal of democracy, the capabilities we have to make sure that we can project our power where we need to, and defend our homeland, both here and for our allies where we need to. And so creating that movement is a category. I think American Dynamism sums it up very, very, very well. You and I spoke about this earlier, but like the American Dynamism is just like the American dream. It doesn't just exist in America. It exists everywhere. Everywhere you go. In fact, countries call us all the time and they say, how do we get American Dynamism in Japan? How do we get American Dynamism in Australia? How do we get American Dynamism in Europe? They call us.
That's incredible. Yeah,
they want it. But it's just like if you ask the people, if you go around a lot of countries in the world and you ask people what dream they have, they always say the American dream.
America is the best marketing engine in the world.
Totally.
I grew up on actually a lot of other like friends I meet here who also moved to America like me. They're like, wait, how did you grow up watching like Star Wars? And, how did you grow up watching all these other like shows that are very, how are you a Marvel fan? Or I'm like, wait, that's such a deep part of culture almost everywhere. Yeah. So you do end up having the American dream by extension.
Totally. You hear stories about people growing up, basically in towns with dirt roads in Africa, like in Nigeria, they grew up watching Western movies, and they have this idealized dream and they want to come here and build something. It's amazing.
They watch Iron Man and they see Elon Musk. They're like, wait, is that the real life Iron Man?
Totally. Totally. Right. Everybody wants to be Tony Stark.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And by the way, it's not easy to become Tony Stark. But there's only one place where it is easiest, the most easy of all, even though it's a very tall order. Yeah. The only place where it's even remotely possible is here. Yeah. And so, America and her allies believe, I think, in the American dream and the American experiment. And so it's a good time and a good moment for American Dynamism.
We talked about this briefly earlier, right? Like you talked about the importance of for America's soldiers and fighters, providing them the best technology. And the question I ask is usually, what other empire would you rather live in?
Totally.
Because I got a taste of, the England and UK and London and, remains of that empire. And it did not feel to me like it's pro-technology. It doesn't feel, my first impression of it was, and I love, I think like the citizens are some of the smartest people in the world, but they end up moving here.
Right.
And I was like, this seems like a glorified version of the subcontinent. A lot of the processes feel similar, and then, so that's what it felt like. And then I went to Germany once and never really went back because you end up going to any of those countries and you feel like, it's hard to get things done here. There's just so many processes. People don't have this pay it forward mentality as much. There's way more to what I guess makes the American technology ecosystem really successful.
I think at a cultural level, America has an entrepreneurial mindset. It's not just that we're a capitalist country, but it's an entrepreneurial mindset. Whether, this country is powered by small businesses. Not everything has to be a venture-backed company. Yeah. And I remember seeing some kind of a report that talked about, the 10 largest companies in Germany, the 10 largest companies in France, and when they were started. And almost all of them are like over 100 years old. Yeah. Not a single new company has entered the stage. Yeah. And then you look at the top 10 largest companies in the US, and like 7 of them are all like less than 20 years old, and maybe all 10 now. I don't even know. And most of them are technology companies. Yeah. And then if you even go to the next like 50 companies in the US, there's so many of them that are all relatively new, young companies. And I think that actually speaks to the real cultural difference, which is that we tolerate failure. If you fail in the US, you can try again. We don't have debtor's prison. We don't have cultural stigma against failure. Lots of countries in the world, if you try to start a business and it fails, it's like shame on your family. Yeah. That's just not the way it is here. Failed? Oh. Yeah. It's for some people in Silicon Valley, it's almost like a badge of honor. And I think that, when countries call us and they ask for how do we get American dynamism in our country, it doesn't, whether it's a Gulf country or a European country or an Asian country, and they call us, it's like the first thing is like cultural. You need to have an entrepreneurial mindset that encourages risk taking and doesn't punish failure. Where people operate with high integrity, and where the government regulator is an enabler and not an inhibitor, which obviously we have work here in the US to do to improve that. Sometimes the regulators here are inhibitors and not enablers. But those are the things we talk about. We don't talk about like, oh, go like run an accelerator or create a venture fund. Like that's like step 8.
Yeah. We've at Draper, I got the chance to work with some of these governments. We work with the government of South Korea, we work with the government of Japan, and also parts of Middle East. I feel like there has been an excessive effort in trying to recreate Silicon Valley. And I don't think you can recreate Silicon Valley, whether that's within the US or outside the US. At some point, it is a cultural question as well. Are you, promoting freedom, and are you like reducing barriers? And that like probably comes first. But then you should probably lean into whatever's, natively whatever your superpower is, whether that's like regional, whether that's like the talent that's based there. So this question I think about a lot, and I don't know if it can be replicated.
I think that it takes a lot of time. And it takes a long time to really replicate Silicon Valley. And the ingredients are not just the founders, but it's like, do you have the law firms? Do you have the funding environment? Do you have the ability to bring in talent? When we talk to people in some of the Gulf countries, we say like, great, you want to create a startup ecosystem, but like you need more engineers. So that means you need to incentivize people to move there, which means you need to have a flexible immigration policy. And some of the Gulf countries, they're like, well, we love our setup here. We don't really want people coming. And it's like, okay, well, you need engineers, and you're probably, to make engineers, you need universities. You need a long time. So maybe you should bring some in first. So you can create a special visa, like a genius visa, if people want to be entrepreneurs and start companies. And so we really try to help advise them. So I agree. It's not, nobody can, even in the US, we try to replicate Silicon Valley in other cities, Austin, Boston,
Miami.
New York, Miami, right? It's very hard. I think that you can't replicate Silicon Valley in a place where the beach is really nice. That's just like, that's never going to work. So like Miami, the beach is too nice. Like no way to recreate Silicon Valley.
When we post this clip, we should tag Dillian, a friend of the show, and because he was very big on Miami.
I think he moved to California.
He's back in SF now.
In LA. I think Varda's in LA. So like he's in SF in LA. And also you want to be where the smart people are. So you have to create the brain trust, and then you have to create the ecosystem around it. It just takes a lot of work. It is certainly possible. I think the other thing is that the founder mentality has to believe that they have to go big very fast. So like if you look at countries in Eastern Europe that are very small, where they have like really, no offense to these countries, but like crappy markets, like Estonia, tiny market, great founders,
great people,
but great people. All these countries have great people.
Skype came out of there.
Right, but then like they quickly think they realize they have to go international. If you come from a country where you think you have a good economy to build your business in, you'll never expand quickly enough. So like France and Germany and Italy, they always struggle. Spain, they always struggle to like build, because they think their own market is a good place to start. But like Eastern Europe, Israel, these other countries where their own market is so small, the founders are like, we got to go big fast.
It's a forcing function.
Yeah, it's a forcing function.
That actually explains a lot of Eastern European entrepreneurialism. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'd love for you to, we brought up General Catalyst there. Is there a bit of rivalry there? Are robot dogs American Dynamism?
Oh yeah, I did see the video. Robot dogs are American Dynamism, because you like, think about what you need to make a robot dog. That video was so stupid, but I loved it. I've loved it for so many reasons. Because I think like every founder should watch that video, and then they should decide like, do I want to work at a firm that like bets on robot dogs or like doesn't? But a robot dog is American Dynamism, because how do you make a robot dog? Well, on the physical side, you need all the actuators, the motors, you need all the metal parts that you're going to stamp out. You need to make then the PCBs and the hardware. It's like, well, where are you going to make those? Are you going to make those in China? Or are you going to make those here? And if you're going to make them here, can you make them in a way that's cost effective? Is that possible? Then you need, think of a robot dog as taking our computer and bringing it into the physical world. So you need all the autonomy stack. You need all the local motion stack. You need all the software that's going to drive that and create perception and awareness, and then activity and motor skills. And so I think about like maybe not a robot dog specifically as American Dynamism, but everything that goes into making a robot dog is for sure American Dynamism. And I want to work with founders that are like excited about building all the things that allow you to have a robot dog.
Well, to take me Well, that's a good segue. And to take me behind the team, the thesis, how did you, because you built the team and the function from scratch, it's 76 million or $1.176 billion AUM right now.
Yeah, we cut off our fundraise so that we would have exactly 76 million in AUM. We could have gone larger. Maybe we should have gone larger because the opportunity set, I think, is very large. But so the team, so Katherine and I started the practice. I recruited her in 2021. We launched in 2022. Then we hired our other partner, Erin Price-Wright, who joined us. She actually came from Index Ventures. Katherine came from General Catalyst. And even at the time that we launched the American Dynamism practice, there really was not, it feels very in vogue right now. But like even in 2022, which is not that long ago, it's only 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Even when we launched it, this idea that we wanted to invest in defense was still controversial with our LPs.
Yeah.
They thought the markets were not big enough. They thought the Pentagon was not the great customer. They didn't understand the international markets. They didn't understand how energy could be a venture-backable category.
Hardware was taboo. I remember.
Was taboo.
Some deals I found, I have some grievance against Silicon Valley. I would forward it to some
other VCs.
Yeah, other VCs. They're
not
like,
me. I would look.
No, not you. Actually, I didn't know about you until much later. And then the feedback was hardware is too capital intensive, and it's like getting customers is all of the things you mentioned.
Yeah.
So very similar experience.
I would say when you get hardware right, it's so defensible, and the economics and margins get so good so quickly. So it's true. The J curve to revenue growth takes longer.
Yeah.
The capital investment takes longer. And there's firms like Eclipse Ventures and others who have really understood this very, very well. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for those firms. But once the revenue starts working and you really have a product that works, then the scale comes quickly. And Elon famously said, like, the factory is the product. That is true. In software, you can just ship your software. You can make edits, ship your software. It's fine. But in hardware, you have to do the R&D. Then you have to actually build the factory and get into production and really scale up. But once you do that, the size of these opportunities and these TAMs is much, much larger. People get excited about consumer internet. People get excited about enterprise software. But like critical minerals, energy, the entire defense industrial base, these are massive, massive TAMs and industries. And I think that when we pitched that to LPs, they were skeptical, but wanted to believe. We were lucky that I invested in Anduril in 2019, and Katherine did this at GC. And so we were able to show the story of Anduril, and now Anduril continues to get larger and larger, faster and faster. Like the rate of growth is accelerating at these companies. And
2019 was only 2 years after they launched, right? Something like that?
Well, it was only a year after I joined, and then the practice, after the launch of Anduril, it was Series B.
Oh, wow.
And their Series A was quite challenging. I would like to think that I would have done it if I had seen it. But we did the Series B, and then now the company has more than 9,000 people, has opened up massive factories across the United States, done a number of acquisitions, is selling many, many billions of dollars worth of products to the Pentagon and internationally as well. And I think now, so that's the core team of GPs, and then we have a great team of investors around that support our companies, find deals, make investments, pound the table, and the whole team is about 10 of us. So 3 GPs, about 7 or 8 other folks on the investment team, and then we leverage the broader Andreessen platform. So we really are like, I always think we're a very small, nimble, boutique team inside of a huge operating platform that gives us leverage. So when I want to run an event and have the director of the FBI or the deputy secretary of defense, and we've had all these people speak at our events, members of Congress speak at our events, I can leverage our events team, our marketing team, our security team, our legal team, our government affairs team. But really, the investment team is really quite small for our AUM.
And what are you mentioned defense is one of the areas you started with because you were an early investor in Anduril, you and Katherine both. What are some other areas? What's the broader thesis turned out to be now? Well,
things that we thought were sort of discrete categories of interest have turned out to just be increasingly overlapping. So defense, energy is another one. There is no national security without energy, without reliable energy. So that's generation, transport of energy, storage of energy. If an Air Force base loses power, you cannot have planes take off because you have no runway lights. You have no air traffic control systems. If you don't modernize the air traffic control system, you don't have safe skies. And so things like, defense is one piece, but then energy becomes a critical component. How do we keep the lights on in this country? And how do we dispatch power where we need to? Oftentimes, a huge part of our defense industrial base, our defense posture in this in the world is about moving fuel and energy around. If you have a forward operating base in Iraq and you need to keep the lights on, that means you have these generators and you have diesel generators and you're constantly moving fuel around, and it's dangerous and it's expensive and the logistics are crazy, and they can sometimes will pay $200 a gallon. So energy is so tightly coupled to defense. And then space is another category. We thought it was more discrete, but it also overlaps. The Venn diagram overlaps. Space now, we don't think of it just for communications. We don't think of it just for observation, but it may be the home of future compute. It may be the home of energy generation and transmission. We may collect energy in space and then beam it down to Earth or beam it to other satellites in space to power systems. So space and energy and defense are very tightly coupled. Our way of doing, you hear about things like Golden Dome, which is about changing the way that we perceive inbound threats to the United States. That is a space-based program. So defense, space, tightly coupled. Public safety. You need, for the American dream to be real, a cornerstone of that is feeling safe in your community, in your home, where you live, and being able to do your jobs, have your kids go to school, all these things. And so public safety is a huge part of where we invest. And then now I would say we increasingly have shifted left from energy and defense and look at, well, what do you need to have reliable energy? What are the critical minerals you need? Do you need lithium? You need copper? You need nickel? What do you need for manufacturing? And we look at the manufacturing and supply chain and critical mineral needs that actually support the entire industrial base in this country. And we think those are great opportunities.
How do you define public safety?
Public safety is everything from 911 services, first responders. So when you call 911, in this country, we have a lot of people that come from a lot of different places. And when they call 911, they may not speak English. So you want to have a 911 service that can translate what you're saying. If you call and you speak Spanish, or you speak Mandarin, or you speak Arabic, or whatever you speak, oftentimes you call 911, they only speak English. But a lot of people in this country, in the worst moment in their life, speak a different language. So we have made investments in companies like Prepared 911, which recently got acquired, that helps do real-time translation on the fly. You and I, we have FaceTime on our phones where we can show video of what's happening in the world around us. When you call 911, they only get audio. Why don't they get like a FaceTime experience? Why can't you say, this is what the accident looks like? This is how big the fire is. And so we want to make sure that first responders have the most advanced tools and the most advanced capabilities, like GPS. Again, you and I can do Find My Friends and see where you are if you share your location with me. Why can't I just hit a button on my phone and share my location with 911? Why don't they just get it automatically when you call 911? Why do I, it's just a phone call. They should know where I am and not have some like hard-coded address of where I registered my cell phone when I bought it like 4 years ago. They still think I live in like, Montana or something. So that's part of public safety. And then law enforcement. Law enforcement's a key part of this. You want law enforcement to have the best tools to allow policing to be the most objective it can be. You want police to pull over the right silver Camry, not every silver Camry. And so we now live in this amazing world where computer vision and license plate reading can help make policing more objective. People, we see these things having just profound positive impacts on the safety of communities. And so we're very proud to invest in all these public safety categories.
You've almost like, you've given like a request for startups in the public safety domain by mentioning some of these problems. And I'm sure it's like...
I didn't even get to drones, by the way.
What is the case for drones? Yeah.
So again, people like sometimes they get this idea, well, we actually call the program in public safety drone as first responder. And people say like, well, that sounds crazy. Like I call 911 and a drone shows up. But then think about this. A lot of cities pay for helicopters for police, for emergencies. And like that makes sense, except that a helicopter requires pilots and a lot of fuel. And it costs tens of millions of dollars a year, just like in Los Angeles, to have 2 or 3 helicopters. But drones cost a fraction of that. And drones, what does a helicopter do when it comes onto an accident scene or follows a car chase? It makes the environment much safer because they provide much more situational awareness. If somebody calls 911 and they say, there's a guy in an alley, he's got dark skin and he has a shotgun. If you call 911 and say that, and people call the 911 all the time and they say this, the police are going to respond with like their hand on their gun, heart rate elevated. There's a guy in the alley with, like a sketchy guy, maybe with a gun. However, what if it just turns out it's like the janitor with a broom? If you have a drone go there first that provides a camera and says, wait, there's no guy with a gun. There's just like the janitor with a broom. That de-escalates the whole situation. The policeman says, I don't even need to show up. But like if they do show up, they just say, look, somebody called. I'm just checking it out. They don't have their hand on the gun. Their heart rate's not elevated. It's a much more de-escalated situation. And so the idea that we could have drones respond to every 911 call is really powerful. Show us what the fire looks like before the fire department gets there. Show us what the car accident looks like. So don't even do car chases anymore and put pedestrian lives at risk. Just have the drone follow the car till it parks, then have the police come in. By the way, San Francisco now does this incredibly well.
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, so car thefts and break-ins are way, way down in San Francisco, and drones are a huge part of the reason why. Did you get broken into?
Yes.
Oh, no. It still happens, but much less. And now the car chases in San Francisco, they are a thing of a past. And I can show you a clip of this like criminal was on a podcast and talking about if you want to commit crime, you shouldn't do it in San Francisco because they have all these drones now and flock cameras and things that will catch you. And like if you want to commit crimes, do it in a different city.
Do it in a different city.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. This happened this year, but hopefully it's going to be increasingly sort of safer.
More rare. Yeah. Hopefully you're the exception, no longer the rule.
Hopefully I'm the exception. That's true. Yeah. It's happened, to be fair, only once in 4 years, which is an anomaly for San Francisco.
Yeah, that sounds like, because in San Francisco, I think it was like a daily occurrence.
It was a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
You know, the
people used to like leave their windows down and stuff.
You know, the fact that there were so many people, like repair maintenance firms and services companies that had like this home service. I was like, oh, so you guys know that this happens every other hour. Like,
yeah, the windshield repair people love it.
Yeah, the windshield repair people show up in 45 minutes and they're like, we sourced your car. Okay, yeah, we've got a lot of those. Like we'll be right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we're entering a world where you know, people are going to start to really realize that, again, regardless of their politics, it's like they're just going to realize that they want to live in a safe community or not. They can talk about all these other things because, like, you know, right now, like when you deploy cameras and drones and things like that, people can have concerns about surveillance, and they're valid concerns to have. Like we should have that conversation. But I would say that these technologies have more oversight, more regulation, and more laws, and in fact are often locally regulated, like data retention and all these things, much more than the phones in our pocket, which are constantly tracking us. And they actually provide a real systemic and I would say citywide benefit, which is they make us safer. And when you talk to business leaders in these communities, when you talk to the leaders of the more marginalized communities, they all love it. Like rich people live behind gates, right? Rich people have their own security. Poor people do not live in gated communities. Poor people do not have their own security. So like you could actually argue that by not investing in public safety, we're actually disenfranchising the people that need the support the most and need these protections the most. And so people can kind of like whine all day about surveillance when they're carrying their iPhone in their pocket and like constantly posting to social media. But really, and like, you know, these cameras that get deployed and the drones that get deployed, you know, a 7-day retention policy, no storage of long-term data, all these things that cities regulate and are abided by, like these actually make a difference in people's lives and actually make them safer and actually save lives.
Well, there's this bigger question around what is making cities like San Francisco less safe or New York less safe, whereas some smaller cities in America are way safer. But maybe we'll get into that debate another time. But to tell me more about the investing structure, I've had guests on the show who have, actually, you just mentioned a mutual, so Neil Taliwal, who's been on the show.
Yeah,
he's against the investment committees at all. He even went so far and called it stupid for firms that have investment committees. How would you describe American Dynamism's internal structure? And
the investment committee model, I think, is stupid. And the reason is that you can't have this shadowy cabal of people that have not paid attention to a deal, that have not looked at a deal, that haven't spent their time working on a deal, come in and randomly like veto a deal. First of all, it's disheartening to the other GP who wants to do the deal, the other partner who wants to do the deal. It's also disheartening to an entrepreneur to find out that like, oh, the person I've spent months and months working with, who's done all the customer calls, who's done all the diligence, who's done all the work, that person couldn't actually get my deal over the line, and some like group behind the scenes that I really haven't spent time with other than maybe like a 45-minute pitch in the front of a conference room or something, you know, just randomly said, I don't like this deal. Like I was in a bad mood today. I didn't get enough sleep last night. Like we're not going to do this investment. So I don't believe in the investment committee model. That said, and we don't have it. So on our team, if you do the work, if you spend the months getting to know the founder, you do the customer calls, you do the founder references, you do all the diligence, the market work, and everything you do, and you get to high conviction, you should do the deal. In fact, it would be crazy to not let you do the deal. I think the only role of an investment committee or a CIO or some kind of a person who has to approve a deal is to really make sure that you actually did a process and did the work. So I'd say IC is for process, but not for conviction. Conviction has to fall at the feet of the person who wants to do the deal. But it's like, if you find out about a hot deal on a Friday and you get all spun up and you're like, oh, they're going to get all these term sheets from, all these other firms. What may not be true. Maybe it's true. I don't know. You've never done any founder references. You have no idea if this person's really any good. Oh, they worked at SpaceX for 3 years. Well, like, were they like top 1% at SpaceX or like top 20% at SpaceX? Because that's like a big difference, and then it's like, well, then maybe you haven't done the work. Maybe you should just cool your jets a little bit, do the work. Maybe we miss this round. Maybe we try to come in with a check 6 months from now after we've really done the work. So I think process I see, but no conviction I see.
Do you have a more concentrated strategy? Because you mentioned like you're clearly in favor of process, right? And then it's okay, like if you miss the hot deal in the moment and you can come back in 6 months later, and I guess the fund is set up in that way. I
wouldn't say it's okay to miss the hot deal.
Okay. So let's rephrase. It's never okay.
It's never okay.
Yeah.
We live and die by doing the best deals.
Yeah.
Venture is a business that follows the power law. I'm sure you've talked about this many, many times with all the other guests. And so you have to do the right deal. It is more important to put money into the right deal late than to miss it entirely, for sure. I sort of think on that side, like if a category is emerging, take like interceptors or drones or robot dogs or whatever. It's our job as VCs to bet on the right company and make sure in that category. If the category doesn't work out, like let's say it turns out robot dogs just aren't a category, it doesn't work out, but we bet on the best company. That's fine. We can't predict the future. We're not fortune tellers. Yeah. If we were, you and I would buy lottery tickets. Yeah. But if we bet on the wrong company in the category and the category works, but we bet on the wrong one, like shame on us. Like that's our mistake. And so it is important, I think, to be able to do the diligence and do the work and make those investments. And then I do think it's important to try to put as much money as you can behind those companies, always as early as possible. But when it's working, I often think, why not put more money in? And we have LPs that believe the same thing. So when people see us go from a $660 million fund to a $1.2 billion fund for our second fund, it's not like we still want to do lots of seeds and A's, but we also want to be able to write those $100 million follow-on checks into the companies where it's working. And our LPs would like us to do the same. And we, my view is pretty simple. Like, why should I allow another investor to put more money into what I think are the best companies? Like, why should I allow that? We'll just do that ourselves.
So going back to the question, is it like a concentrated strategy at the fund?
Well, it's concentrated in certain categories. I mean, we'll do, in our current fund, we'll do 30 to 40 probably seed and A investments. And then we'll probably do 10 or so very, very large checks. But I would say at least half of those 10 will be into existing investments. So take, for example, a company like Saronic. We've now written multiple checks across multiple AD funds into Saronic because we think it's just a generational company and we think they're building an incredible business. So I don't know if you call that concentrated or not. Right. I mean, it's not like these people, it's not like an accelerator where they make like 500 investments.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. It's not, you're not doing like six, even
these are
like
high conviction bets. I mean, when we partner with a founder, we're partnering for a decade or more, oftentimes more, especially for the best companies. And so when we make, it's not about the check size. When we get to conviction, I often, I talk about this with my partners, we're not thinking about, are we making an investment? It's like, are we willing to lose $5 million, $10 million, even $20 million? Like that part doesn't matter, right? The loss doesn't matter. It's like, are we really committing the time for the next 10 plus years to support this entrepreneur? Are we going to help them raise downstream capital and future financing rounds? Are we going to use our reputation to go open doors for them in the halls of Congress, to go open doors for them at the Pentagon or the Department of Energy? Are we going to leverage our government affairs team and our policy teams and our legal teams and our national security teams and put our reputation on the line? When we go meet with the prime minister of this country, or the vice president of this other country, are we going to bring them along with us? Like, do we want to be in that boat with them? Do we want them in our boat? And so those are the things we really think about and try to decide. And so I would say it's concentrated from that standpoint.
That makes a lot of sense. And if you were doing 40 or 50 of those early stage deals a year, yeah, you would just have less time, I guess, to run that process and try to figure out if this is a 10-year plus relationship you're going to invest in.
Yeah, and the good thing is when we do a seed investment in a company that's doing early, that's such an early stage company, well, they probably don't have to spend so much time in Washington, D.C. They're still in the R&D phase. So we're able to allocate our resources appropriately. But, but once a company gets, if we have a critical minerals and mining company called Mariana Minerals, and they have a lot of policy and regulatory work to do. And while they're an early stage company, we do really spend a lot of time to try to make sure that we can open as many doors for them as possible.
Speaking of policy and opening doors, in DC, I had Shaheen at Lux. We talked at Hill and Valley. He was on the pod, and he mentioned that almost every company at some point is going to be in DC for policy, whether that's even if they're not selling to the government, because there's going to be some competitor that's going to come along, or there's going to be some regulation that's going to come along that's going to risk their business. So, in those relationships, you can't cash in the moment. These are built over years. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's
totally? I think DC is it's complicated because DC is actually both a transactional place but also a relationship place. The foundation is built on relationships, but in the moment, especially when you're talking to someone who's in the House of Representatives, they're running for re-election every 2 years. They're constantly fundraising, which I think adds a very challenging and complicated dynamic. And then you have people that are on different committees where they have a tremendous amount of influence. And if you want, even if you don't, he's correct. Even if you don't want to sell to the government, you're affected by government policy, whether it's immigration policy, whether it's regulatory policy, whether it's acquisitions and appropriations policy, and all these things matter. And for every startup that's going out there to figure out if they can build a product that wins in the market, they also have to make sure that there's not a regulatory environment that's going to come down on them later. I mean, we see this now happening with AI. I don't think a lot of people working in the AI space realize that data center contracts were going to get canceled. It's such a crazy idea. People have this belief that somehow data centers suck up all their water. This has been debunked now over and over, but people still believe it. And the misinformation campaign against data centers, I think, has been it's been amazing for me to see. It's kind of like what happened in nuclear in the 70s,
right?
Where we basically lost 30 to 40 years of productivity and clean energy and power generation from nuclear because a bunch of people spread misinformation about nuclear power, right? Think about all the people that hundreds of thousands of people who have died from coal and from oil. And in the United States, I think we're at 0 people have ever died from a nuclear power incident, right? 0 people. It's a very small number. And, but because of that regulatory environment, people were impacted. And now finally, we spend a lot of time in DC, and there's a lot more tailwinds now for nuclear. We've pushed this agenda in the Biden administration. We've pushed it in the Trump administration. We've pushed it in the halls of Congress. We've pushed it with the Department of Interior, with the Department of Energy. And now it's you can see this happening. There's just a huge amount of momentum for nuclear power. So it doesn't matter what category your company is in, you are impacted by DC, but you have to really invest the time. We didn't just start going to DC when one person got elected or another person got elected. We go no matter who's there. With the firm is actually very bipartisan in terms of how we spend our time in Washington, just advocating for the interests of startups, for technology, and for making sure that America has total, dominance.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I actually, as you were sharing the nuclear example, another one popped up, which is I think the same thing happened to supersonic flight.
Yeah.
Right. Noise pollution or whatever. We don't really know exactly what it was, but I'm sure in your job you commute a lot, and I have to also be on the plane a lot, and 6-hour flights across the
cross-country commute is terrible.
Cross-country commute is terrible.
It is terrible, and it's fixable.
It's partly also with the current planes. It's a regulation problem. These planes can go faster,
right?
So this is like a 2-hour or 1.5-hour flight maximum, and we're spending 6 hours.
I think the regulators got to a place where it was easier to say no to things rather than creating incentives. So here's an example on supersonic flight. Let's just say the noise thing was a real issue. I don't know if it's really an issue, but let's just pretend like it's a real issue. What they really should say is here's an incentive to go build an engine that operates this much more efficiently or quieter, doesn't create a sonic boom. And there are ways to create engines that avoid the sonic boom. I'm not an expert in this, but that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
And so they should create those incentives. It's the same with like mining. Rather than banning all kinds of mining in the United States, which is a lot of what the EPA did, they should just say, look, if you want to mine copper, it needs to be 90% efficient or have only this much slag or refuse or, non-reusable material. If you want to create these kinds of chemicals, you have to do it this efficiently. Like they should just create incentives and limits and not just say outright bans. And I think we now are finally getting to a regulatory environment in the US where the different regulators are finally saying, wait a minute, how do we enable innovation and motivate innovation? I mean, you saw this really, I think modern day Americans saw this for the first time with Operation Warp Speed, which made the COVID vaccine. If you look at all these countries around the world, and how many of them tried to come up with solutions for COVID? Only the United States, which said like, if you make a vaccine that works, we'll give you $1 billion guaranteed. And then we had like, depending on how you count, we had 3 working vaccines in a record amount of time. And it was capitalism at its best. It was regulatory environment at its best. And it was America working at its best. But we could do the same thing for energy, for mining, for aircraft engine manufacturing. And I do think that our startups need to be aware today that Washington and Silicon Valley needs to meet Washington much, much sooner and much earlier in their trajectory, or they will get slapped in the face unexpectedly. Yeah,
I guess you have a very good point that highlight the problems, and at least that gives builders, this direction that, okay, like if we do want to do this particular thing, we need to solve this particular problem. That could be a 10-year problem or whatever timeline you can't really control, but at least start working towards it. And look, I don't want to, obviously I'm biased to our American Dynamism team, right? But like, when you're a tiny startup and you're just trying to not die, you're just trying to build your product, you don't want to have to go out and also build a government affairs team. Yeah. So we do try, when we take our management fees, it's not just to pad our paycheck. Instead, we use it to hire people. And we have a huge government affairs team, a huge national security team, a huge international relations team to help you really understand the international dynamics, the regulatory dynamics, the national security dynamics. I mean, we have a guy on the team who's a lawyer who worked on the select committee for competition with China, who's a national security advisor and works full-time at our firm. And he will consult and advise and help you, and even sometimes help you advocate for what you need to do in Washington. And we just have a broad team to help do that. So our founders get to benefit from that before they have to go build it themselves. You mentioned China. I had Leland Miller, who's on the U.S. China Security and Exchange Commission. We had a really fantastic conversation on China, and he brought up how China has, and I think you've touched upon this as well. Like most of the GDP is sort of manufactured. It's really heavily dependent on the U.S. And yet they are a threat because it's an autocracy, and you have a single decision maker, and they decided a few years ago they're going to focus on the critical technology sectors you mentioned. American Dynamism is also focused on. And with the recent visit, we saw there's some effort at trying to figure out if there's a way to coexist, work together. Like what are areas that are you make compromises. And so what do you think like long term about like the China situation? I'm definitely not the China expert, but I will say we currently coexist. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of trade, business, intellectual capital, and relationships with China, and I think that is more important than anything else from a national security, military standpoint. In fact, I think it prevents the military side of things getting too crazy. I think it keeps China at bay in the South China Sea, from going too aggressive against the Philippines or Taiwan, or South Korea. And that economic dependence is actually probably one of the greatest strengths of stability. And I think it's important to remember that. That said, they are very, very good at doing, I always think the benefit of an autocracy, it's like a dictatorship. You can always do a few things really, really well. And they are very, very good at doing a few things really, really well. America is good at like doing 1,000 things like pretty good,
And like every once in a while, one of them is like exceptional, but that's usually in spite of all the things that get in their way. But we're really good at like planting 1,000 seeds in America and doing things pretty well. China is very good in my view of doing a few things extraordinarily well. And they really focused on manufacturing, on the industrial supply chain, on manufacturing capabilities. So you take a company like DJI that makes drones. They also built the whole ecosystem around it. Motors, magnets, all the copper you need, all the lithium you need for the batteries, the battery manufacturing plant. They did all this stuff. They got rid of all they don't have the same regulatory environment, the worker protection environment, the chemical and EPA requirements that we have. They don't have any of that stuff. They just throw that all aside and say, make batteries as quickly and cheaply as possible, make motors as quickly and cheaply as possible. Who cares what the worker conditions are like? Who cares what the environmental impact is? You need a new coal plant? Let's build a new coal plant.
You need funding? We'll print more money.
Yeah, we'll just print more money. Right. And so it's an unfair game.
Yeah.
So when we talk about winning and bringing these critical minerals capabilities back, or these critical technology areas back to the US, we can't replicate China. We can't beat Shenzhen by trying to create our own Shenzhen. We're not going to win that way. Yeah. We're going to win through American ingenuity, factory automation, using advanced AI and capabilities, really creating more efficiencies out of our supply chain, out of our minerals and mining capabilities, doing it more nearshore, really leveraging our allies. Mexico is an amazing ally. Canada could be an amazing ally. The other countries in Central America and South America can be amazing allies. A lot of lithium comes from South America. We can make more here in the US, but let's leverage our relationships there also. Let's start making more batteries in the US or amongst our nearshore allies. So we have ways to win and compete. And I think we need to. That said, I don't worry. I don't stay up at night. Maybe other people do, about like a major conflict with China popping off.
Oh,
that said, deterrence is the best defense.
Yeah.
And if China believes that we have overwhelming capability and force, it deters a conflict. If they don't believe that, they will get more expansionist and aggressive. They may not attack America, but if they attack one of our allies who we've committed to supporting, we could be in trouble.
Right.
And I think America is not up for the fight against China today. And the best way to avoid it is to make sure that if we did get into a fight, we would win with overwhelming force and dominance. And so that is part of why American Dynamism is so important.
So you're starting in 2022, we're midway through 2026, almost 5 years, half a decade into this. And most of the companies we're backing are at least decade-long journeys, right? But halfway through, how are you looking at the next 5 years of American Dynamism? One thing that pops up in conversations is, love your take on it, is that, defense as the only customer, there's a limited market, right? And then so maybe the case is that in ever-growing conflict, that market expands. Yes, that budget is going to increase, but in increased volatility, maybe you could take one side that this budget is only going to expand, not just the US's budget, perhaps allied countries like Australia or UK and Europe, like they also expand their budgets, right? Yeah. And so that TAM is going to increase. But for a true generation, there are only 4 or 5 primes, right? Defense primes. And then maybe there's room for 2 more, and Anduril is one of them. So are there going to be more defense primes in a category? Is like, how do you see that market first? And then or have you do you reevaluate midway through the thesis in that, okay?
I think every time we reevaluate it, we find that we've underestimated the size of these markets. Take, for instance, the maritime market where Saronic operates. You could say, okay, well, we can look at how much money the Navy spends on ships, on surface. And right now, Saronic does surface vessels. So now you're just looking at boats and ships.
Right.
And you can look at that market and you can say, okay, well, there's some companies in that space. This is how much they make. But when we get to autonomous ships, things that are going to be doing everything from intelligence and reconnaissance to transport, to defense, to attritable systems. Right. And then you think about, well, wait a minute, who is their customer base? Just the Department of War? I don't think so. Not just in the US, but then you think internationally, every single country with a maritime border, which is a lot of countries, actually touch a body of water,
Yeah.
they're all customers for Saronic. And as the world has more and more autonomous systems, you just see what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Like you're like, every country is like, wait a minute, we need to know what's happening in our adjacent bodies of water. We need to have maritime control and sovereignty and maritime patrols and capabilities and defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities. So the market for Saronic, like from when we invested to what we think it is now, has exploded, maybe 10x, maybe 100x. And so we just think there's a much bigger opportunity. That's the first part. The second is that countries are spending this money and they want new capabilities and new technology that's not going to come from the legacy primes. So Europe has already said they're going to double their GDP spending on defense. Okay. Yeah. That's a huge increase across the board, across all the NATO countries, that they're going to increase their spending. And as much as they would all love to have their own primes in their own country, France would love Thales to solve every problem. I think in an ironic way, the US will be like Switzerland in that every country will partner with the US. Germany will partner with Anduril, will partner with Saronic. France will partner with Anduril, will partner with Saronic and others. And there will be in Castelion and many of our other investments, and there will actually be room for many more primes. And while we have 5 primes today, you have to remember, if you go back in time to even our own defense industrial base, there used to be 30 or 40 very, very large defense primes. They kind of got conglomerated together, but we're now reaching a point where there's room for a lot more. And as we focus on space dominance in this country and internationally, on maritime dominance, undersea dominance, autonomy systems, brand new missile capabilities, and attritable systems, I think we're going to see a whole bunch of new companies get created. And then the same is true in energy. We have an investment in a company like Base Power. Base Power now is just focused in the Texas market and expanding to a couple other states. Over time, they will expand across the entire country and then internationally, and they will provide not just residential solutions, but commercial solutions and then potentially government solutions.
Justin has been on the show. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's very smart.
He's awesome. So, okay. So first, some of the categories you mentioned and companies you mentioned, I can see them having further down the line. Yes, they start with defense use case, and even that market is, pretty big, large, and hard. But yes, in 10 years is nothing in a company's journey, right? So if they're successful doing this, they can, of course, if they have the capabilities to expand, and they can,
SpaceX is like 20 something years old.
Exactly.
I think they would say they're still very early in the mission.
Yeah, I agree.
They haven't even launched their cell phone carrier yet,
right?
The mobile carrier.
But then there's some other companies that for them it might be harder to pivot, or maybe that's just like, the nature of the games. Not every outcome is like a $100 billion outcome, and that's fine.
Well, right. I mean, look at enterprise software. Not every company becomes Oracle. Not every company becomes Salesforce or, Google or Alphabet. Meta, Alphabet or Meta. It's very, not every company becomes huge, but there's an M&A environment, and that's all fine. The entire ecosystem is predicated on that being part of the calculus. And, if we make 30 or 40 investments, it's probably the fund returns will probably only come from 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. From a dramatic standpoint, like from a power loss standpoint.
A fair point, because I was thinking of these interceptor companies and missile companies that are also, getting well funded, I guess with the capabilities you're building along the way, it can help you branch into other businesses. It just really depends.
I mean, here's just one more example. Yeah. Let's say we're creating all these surface vessels that are now going to need to be refueled. They're autonomous. They need to be refueled or recharged, which means you need a whole new set of docking systems. You need power charging systems. Our U.S. destroyers they're not like electrical boats. They're diesel or fuel boats. No. And so you need to have a whole new electrical subsystem to charge all these systems up. If you're launching 1,000 drones from a U.S. destroyer that are battery powered or they're rocket motor powered, you need to have all the infrastructure to manage all these massive numbers of attritable systems and drone systems and missile systems. It's like there's a whole new set of companies that haven't even been created yet. They're going to work on all of that. How, it's like I joke with someone the other day. It's like people read in the news, we set up this dock. I don't know if people remember the news. When the U.S. was sort of getting involved in Gaza, they set up a dock on the beach and it lasted 3 days. Then it got washed away. And it's like, if we're in a real conflict and we need to be able to have supplies go from boats to shore, we can't have a dock get washed. By the way, that's not a high hurricane area or something. That's the calm Mediterranean seas. Yeah. If we can't build a dock that can last more than 3 days, we're in trouble. Where are we going to charge up all these boats? Where are we going to dock and unload supplies? Are we going to have autonomous robots taking things off of ships? They need a dock. Where's it going to come from? We have all these problems and so many things that can be solved and so many companies that are remaining, that are waiting to be built.
That's a fair point too. I guess the critique that gets brought up on the market size. Are there new categories you've considered since you originally conceived?
Yeah, I would say the shift left mentality, which really means like, look at what does the defense industrial base need? Like, what does a company like Anduril need? And then are there companies to be created left of that so that the precursors that go in, carbon fiber companies, motor companies, actuator companies, minerals, mining companies. We never thought when we started American Dynamism that we would invest in a mining company. And then the question is there a venture-backable bet where the margins and the TAMs are large enough and the margins can grow to be compelling enough, and where software can have a disproportionate impact on the outcome, and it's not just breaking rocks, you know? And we believe the answer is yes. And we're very excited about the investments we've made in those categories. And so I'd say we continue to find new surface area. And that's why, again, a lot of companies would like to say that like like people always joke like the Uber of whatever is, it's like Uber, or like the Anduril of X is going to be Anduril. But like Anduril is an amazing company. We love being invested in Anduril, but they're not going to do everything. Yeah. And there's categories that they really don't want to be in and shouldn't be in. And we think those are interesting to look at. And there's even more surface area that we keep discovering every day. I mean, cybersecurity is another one. I would just say, I spent my whole career in cybersecurity, and the idea of really advanced offensive cyber and really advanced defensive cyber. If you look at the missions happening in Venezuela and Iran, cyber is now a key component of our joint operations. It's not just the Air Force and the Marines and the Navy. It's now cybercom as a part of every campaign and every mission. And the market for cybersecurity is probably 100 times larger than I previously thought it was. Oh yeah, especially in the AI age, it's probably like 100x. Yeah, it's transformative. Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, I noticed that you have a degree in anthropology, so I'd love to ask what are some takeaways you have that you've like taken into how you operate your career. Anthropology is an amazing degree. For people that don't know, anthropology is a study of people and culture. And for people that like to read, it's probably one of the best majors in university, especially if you have other interests and you want to just read about other things or do other work, because all you have to do in anthropology is read a lot and write papers. That's it. There's like no other work. There's no other homework. There's nothing else. You just read a lot and occasionally write a paper. What culture historically are you a big fan of? I mean, I loved reading about revolutions, whether it was like revolutions in South America and women's revolutions in Argentina, about dictators and how dictators came to power. There's like a funny little book I always tell people to read called The Dictator's Handbook. What's it about? It's actually even about like local elections in Southern California and how it's much easier to get elected to office, especially small local office elections, than people realize. You might only need to get a few hundred votes to win an election, and then you start to come to power, and then you can become more famous. $50,000. Totally. Yeah. And it's even like swinging elections at the regional level is much easier than people realize. It's a few hundred K in many states. That's right. Like one or two billboards can transform an election. If you just say like, oh, this guy kills jobs, like all of a sudden everything can change. And so the Dictator's Handbook is very good to just show you a little bit of how the world actually works in politics and government and elections. And I think so anthropology for me was really about contemporary anthropology, not about like primates and evolution. It was more about society, culture, revolution, economies, economics, and it was great. And then that fundamental level, the study of people and culture plays into everything I do. It makes me understand that there's lots of people with different perspectives around the world and even in this country. And I respect and keep an open mind about everyone's perspectives. It helps me learn and think about the world in a more broad way. I think it allows me to think from first principles. There's lots of things that we do at this firm where we really take a step out in front of our peers, and we often get flack for it. And then you fast forward a year or two and everyone looks back and says, oh, that makes so much sense. American Dynamism is a good example. And I think that we want to work with the best technologists, the best entrepreneurs, and having an anthropology degree helped me, I think, have a better and more open mind about what that can look like and how we can support those people. And I think finally, the venture capital, I've been a VC now for 8 years. I don't know if I'm good. I think I'm okay. It looks good so far, but we'll see when the returns come in. Anduril alone looks good. Yeah, Anduril looks good. Flock Safety looks good. Lots of companies look good. Yeah. Base Power looks great. Yeah. Base Power looks great. Yeah, we're very lucky. And but I would say it's really about trying to understand people and then understanding how the world works as much as you can. And when putting those two things together, that's really what venture capital is about. In many ways, venture capital is like applied anthropology in some way. I agree, which is I was so interested in the question. So what culture have you
sort of other culture have you studied, borrowed from, that has helped you understand the world in this profound way?
Oh, I have to pick one. I mean, I think that there's a lot to learn from every culture. I think there's a lot of cultures around the world that prioritize math and science. And in the US, I think it's probably one of the most important things that we've lost sight of. And when you're in everywhere, if you spend time in India, I know you're from Pakistan, you spend time in Pakistan, you spend time in the Middle East, you realize that there is a grounded truth in math and science, and it's always been important to cultures.
I didn't have a career option besides engineering.
Right. You didn't have a career option. It was just important. And your family said, you better be good at math and science. You go to the same is true in Estonia. And you go to, some of these Eastern European countries, and the focus on math and science and learning and rigorous pursuit of knowledge is just is put in front of almost everything else. The parents don't want their kids to grow up to be farmers, right? They don't want that. They want them to go achieve more than they did. And I think that I've learned a lot by trying to understand what makes those cultures different. What makes a culture entrepreneurial, forgiving of failure. Israel is very good at this. They call themselves a startup nation. And
there are a few books on that.
But it's like they're okay with failure because like they have to keep trying things just to survive and to live, and they have to export their ingenuity and intelligence because they're just such a small, tiny country. And I think you look at UAE, it's the same way. UAE said, we have oil for a while, but like how do we become a financial center of the Gulf region?
So Saudi Arabia is
Saudi Arabia is trying to do this now, right? And it's actually, if you spend time in Saudi Arabia, and I've been now a few times, and we have lots of friends there, that like they really, really recognize like the oil train will run out at some point, and they need to have something else. And so they want entrepreneurship, they want manufacturing, they want tourism, they want to modernize, and they want to be the heart of the Middle East. And I think that, Egypt has gone through different waves of going through this, where they've done this very successfully.
Egyptians are very entrepreneurial.
Very entrepreneurial, lots of manufacturing and construction, and they've exported that all around the world very successfully. And, and I think if you look at what's happening in South America and Brazil in particular, Brazil is like a crazy political environment, but tons of amazing neobanks and entrepreneurial. And
Argentina as well.
Yeah, Argentina as well. Like the fintech companies that are coming out of Brazil shows that there's a huge population of people there that want to use advanced technology and modernize.
Our best fintech investment is also in Argentina.
So like it is amazing. There's so much to learn from all these countries. Look at a country like Japan where I've spent time reading about the advanced manufacturing and the heyday of like the 70s, 80s, and 90s of Japan, and then what went wrong, and how do they bring it back? You think about Sony and these companies that were really pioneers and innovators, but then kind of lost their way. Why'd they lose their way? And so I think there's a lot to learn from all different places, and then of course the US as well.
What you said, you studied how different cultures are entrepreneurial. If you had to summarize, what are your takeaways on excuse me, what makes a culture entrepreneurial?
I think that it's easier to maybe talk about what makes a culture not entrepreneurial.
Okay.
In Japan, for instance, they're very risk averse.
Oh yeah.
Families want their kids, if they're even having children, to go work at a big megacorp, at a huge heavy industry or a huge financial institution. They don't want them to start a company. It's a source of pride if your son or daughter gets a job at, Mitsubishi or some like, massive company, or Sumitomo or NTT or Docomo or SoftBank or whatever. Like that's a source of pride. If your son or daughter goes and starts a company where there are 2 or 3 people working out of a tiny little garage, that is not a source of pride. No, that has to change. Right?
I can relate. Pakistan was very similar. You believe it or not, I got banned from my own university for organizing a pitch event.
Right.
And there are 2-part reasons. Crazy. One is because, parents start calling up the director of societies, and they're like, wait, we didn't pay our, kids' fees, and we're trying to get them a secure career. And,
they have to go work at Microsoft.
They have to go work at a bank or like at Microsoft or one of these biggest industries.
Right.
They can't be doing business. Like, they can't take risks. So interesting. Japan is very similar in that way, and
even like in the Nordics and Europe, if you work in the Netherlands or some of these other countries, there's a lot of social stigma against failure. Your family is ashamed if you start a business. They don't want to tell their neighbors, oh, it didn't work out. They tried to start a company, it failed. some countries still have kind of like bankruptcy hangs over you, and you carry the debt with you. In America, you just walk away. The C Corp folds, and you don't carry the personal debt with you.
Another thing I found with Japan is they're stickler for rules. They're like very, very process oriented.
Right.
And I don't think you can get innovative without breaking rules.
Right. You need the regulators to be enablers and not inhibitors, and not say, oh, you didn't fill out form 297-B, so now we're going to take your whole company away. I think the US, by the way, needs to be very careful about these things. When our companies now look for where they're going to set up shop, the first thing it used to always be like, people is number one. Number two was like, how close are you for your factory to a nearest intersection and highway intersection? How fast can you get on the interstate? Now, number one is like, all it is like permits and power, maybe power and permits. Like, that's it. Like, people is like a distant third.
Oh, wow.
It's, do we have the power we need to set up our factory? And can we get the permits and the regulatory environment to allow us to operate our business? People is like distant three, if it's even number three. And I think it's important for people to remember that. And countries around the world, by the way, I had some leadership from the UK government meet with me recently. And they said, well, how can we create more startups in the UK? Can we give them money? Can we create a fund?
Deregulate.
Like UK. I'm like, you don't need to give them money. We will give them money. Yeah. But what you can do is allow them to operate. Yeah. If someone wants to create a power company in the UK, allow them to set up business. If they want to create a missile company in the UK, allow them to set up business. Create a regulatory environment that's an incentive structure and an enabler and motivates people to set up shop there. Otherwise, they're just going to keep coming to the US.
Matt Ocko was on the show, and he mentioned from DCVC, he said that if we're going to be serious about reindustrialization, we'll have to deregulate.
Totally. He's correct. Yeah. There's no other way around it. We have created we have a bureaucratic calcified system where they've just added rule after rule after rule with good intention. But over time, the
road to hell starts with good intentions.
Totally. Right? But after 30 or 40 or 50 years of just calcified rulemaking and bureaucracy, and many times these bureaucracies love it because it's like, oh, if I make a new rule, I can hire another person to enforce that rule so I can kingdom build my bureaucracy. And so you just get these massive institutions. And this is why, like, they talk about the Doge effort and these things. And like, I think that they didn't get the messaging quite right because they could have informed the American public better. But it's like, if you just build a new rule and a new program to enforce the rule and you hire more people, you just have these huge calcified bureaucratic institutions.
Ends up being a jobs program.
Yeah, it's a jobs program. It's terrible, but it stifles innovation. Yeah. The real jobs program should foster innovation. Yeah. And that's why you have to really restart and deregulate and gut these institutions and then start over. They won't get everything right, but then we start over and add back the rules that are actually necessary. But like in government, you and I have joked about this. Like, if you want to invite government policymakers or people that work in the Department of War and the Pentagon to dinner to just talk about technology, not a lobbying dinner, not a sales dinner, just dinner. Yeah. Like, there's so many rules and ethical hoops they have to jump through. And then they're like, well, the dinner can't cost more than $25. And it's like, well, I don't even know if I can find a dinner for $25
Order Chick-fil-A
in Washington, D.C. Right. I have to get Chick-fil-A. And, and so it's like, they have all these things. And I'm just like, all I want to do is have dinner and talk about technology. Like, why can't I do that? We got to get rid of all those rules. Some of them, again, we're put there for a good reason, but it's time to really deregulate many of these things and actually let us move more quickly.
I 100% agree. You mentioned that companies now are looking at where can you get power and where is it easier, regulation wise. And especially, I guess, like in more industrial sort of startups and the hardware sector, we've seen some hubs develop. El Segundo is one of them. Austin is another one. Denver is one. Partially its proximity to some government offices as well. With Army Futures Command in Austin, you have the Space Force HQ in Denver, and El Segundo just the talent pipeline there, right? Yeah, and the talent density.
El Segundo had all the defense primes around there. Raytheon, Lockheed, they're all there. You also have Caltech and JPL. Yeah, NASA is there. And so you have all these things. But I will say that a lot of our companies in El Segundo, they start there because the talent is there. But when they think about opening their factories...
It's in Ohio.
Yeah, it's exactly. Anduril is in Ohio. They went from Costa Mesa to Ohio for the big factory. Yeah. And most of our companies, when they think about where they're setting up shop, candidly, the easiest overlay to say is like they're going to the red states. They feel they have more incentives to build there. They have more friendly regulatory environment. They're safer for their employees to live there, and they have more space and more room to grow.
One of our portfolio companies, Firehawk, moved like Oklahoma. Yeah, they moved there, and it's also state incentive. You're right. So there's a lot of incentives. Right. It's like state. They're optimizing for state incentives versus what they should have or they should have ideally optimized for, which is interesting to see. Do you think that's going to lead to the new over time, perhaps like the new Austin or the new El Segundo?
I think it's happening now. I mean, I think we see this in Austin. It's happening. I think Ohio would love to, and some of these states are quite purple even. But I think we see that these hubs are being built where the environment is being fostered to be incentivizing companies to build there and set up shop there. I mean, even Hadrian opened up a huge factory now in Alabama, in Cherokee, Alabama. Not in Los Angeles where the company is headquartered, but the new factory is in Cherokee, Alabama. And when I went to their factory ribbon cutting, you had every major member of Congress for Alabama show up in person. You had the Secretary of the Navy show up in person.
It's incredible support.
Yeah, incredible support. And the incentives from the state, from the governor, actually the future governor of Alabama was there as well. It was really incredible. And by the way, there must have, and I'm not making this up, there must have been 1,000 people from the regional area that showed up to this ribbon cutting. Many of them brought resumes. Like, they just want jobs. They just want a place to work, and they're excited about building things for the U.S. submarine program. They're excited about manufacturing, and people showed up to this ribbon cutting with literally with resumes in hand. I was blown away. You
might have gotten 10 people who did this in SF, and so maybe this geographical contrarianism is probably, maybe not by intention, but like it's probably a great strategy long term.
That's right. I think it's a great strategy, and I think people are going to start to realize there's cities that promote growth and safety, and there's cities that don't. And I think San Francisco finally, for the first time under the new mayor, realizes you can't take these things for granted. People will eventually leave. New York cannot take its economy for granted. We have a mayor who's kind of like a socialist mayor, and he talks about he just wants to tax everything. And I'm fine with more taxes, but they have to put it to good use. They have to actually put it to things that people want and create an environment, without making this too political. But people will eventually leave these places. They'll leave San Francisco, they'll leave LA, they will leave New York, and they will go to a state that wants them there. Maybe that was too political.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I had a lot more political questions, but I'll hold. It's okay.
Yeah. That's as close as we'll get to the fire.
This is as close as it'll get. Well, I do want to talk about your own journey. Started with building a company, OpenDNS, which you eventually sold to Cisco. I'm curious if there's a mentor-like figure you've had in your life, or there's this concept of a personal board of advisors, who you're in touch with every now and then for big decisions in life. Did you have someone like that?
I've had different people at different phases of my life, and I probably should do a better job of carrying some of them along with me. I mean, when I went to Cisco, I first came in there and I had a boss, this guy, David Geckler, who's now the CEO of SanDisk.
Oh, wow.
He was CEO of Western Digital, and they spun out SanDisk. He's now worth like $1 gajillion, as he should be. But at Cisco, I'd never worked in a big company. I had been a benevolent dictator of my own company of OpenDNS. And when you're a benevolent dictator, it's awesome because you can just wake up one morning and you can say, hey, team, that thing that I said was important yesterday is not important. This new thing is important. Everybody go do that. And they're just like, yeah, okay, cool. But when you work at a company like Cisco, and I thought I ran a big business. I ran like a $2.5 billion business at Cisco. But then the guy next to me ran the networking business, which is like a $40 billion a year business that throws off way more cash and profits than mine. And every time I'd say oh, this is really important, this is the most important thing, he'd look at me and be like, nobody cares about your business. Cybersecurity, that's cool. But he's like, I return $20 billion a year to shareholders. What do you do? I was like, I return $1 billion to shareholders. It's pretty good. And so I really had to learn how to flex diplomatic muscle, how to be much more persuasive, how to operate in a large organization, how to navigate lots of organizational complexity. So professionally, he probably doesn't know this, but David Geckler had just a huge impact on me. He would be an amazing guest on your show. He's really a brilliant guy.
I'd love to have him on.
Yeah, he's really brilliant. I don't think he ever does any interviews, but maybe he'll do you. And
maybe that was your government affairs internship, or apprenticeship, right?
Yeah, well, it got me prepared. I tell people all the time that in many ways, Cisco prepared me for American Dynamism and for venture capital because I was no longer a benevolent dictator. As a VC, Like we have minority stakes in these companies.
Yeah.
You know, I try to tell founders what I think, but they can, you know, ultimately it's up to them to do what they want, which is how, you know, how it should be.
You have to build your political muscle and
but I have to
diplomatic
build
muscle.
and like try to convince them why I think I'm right. And if they ignore me, they ignore me. And like, you know, in venture capital, the I told you so is never useful. So you really have to do a good job a priori. So he was somebody. And then I would say, you know, Mark and Ben are very, very engaged in the American Dynamism practice. So I talk to Mark, you know, if you include Signal and phone calls, I probably talk to Mark, I don't know, 10 times a day, 15 times a day, maybe sometimes 100 times a day. And he is really a constant reminder of how venture capital should work, how we should keep an open mind, how we should lean into the future, how we should take risks. Like you should never invest 20 million to hope that you can make 40 million, because that's always a losing strategy in venture. So he's great. He's also just a huge brain, smart person. And Ben is also great from an organizational leadership standpoint, and just a great sounding board and really open to taking risk. And I would say my other partners, Katherine, Aaron, and the rest of the other GPs at the firm, I do call on for advice all the time. You know, we talk about this in the form of deals where like, you know, it's great to win as a team, but if you're going to lose a deal, you can't lose on your own. You have to lose as a team. It's like, if you lose a deal and you didn't ask for help as you were losing it, like shame on you. If you lose and we did everything we could to win, you know, we called in all the reinforcements, we called in, you know, founder references and everything, then fine, we can lose. But you can't lose alone. You can't lose in silence. And
leverage relationships across the firm. If like some other practice as a partner
has a relationship or someone else who can help, like anybody can do a deal, anyone can win. Our economics don't change no matter who does a deal.
Oh, interesting.
Which is really unique about the firm. And so it doesn't just apply to deals. I call my partners for advice all the time. They call me for advice all the time. You know, a lot of us are founders and have run companies. So my mentors are really a lot of the people that I work with today. And then even some of the founders I work with, I would consider people I would call for advice and perspective. I think one of the best skills that leaders have is the ability to lean on their network of experts. And, you know, the only caveat I would say is it's important to know as your scope or scale of responsibility increases that you sometimes have to move on from some folks and move and gather new mentors and leaders and peers to talk to. But I think I've always had them and I've always valued them even from when I was like in 8th grade and I had my first job. I've always had really good mentors and opportunities that have come as a result of having great mentors. What's
the most memorable piece of advice you've gotten from Mark or Ben or one of the other partners that completely changed 180-degree your thinking on something because you were like, oh, hold on a second?
Well, this one didn't work out the way he wanted, but actually my boss at Cisco, this guy, David Geckler, I had just come back from like some international trip that I had done for Cisco. Like came back from Frankfurt and I was sitting in a staff meeting and I was like really, and I was annoyed by the staff meeting. And I think someone had also just asked me if I was willing to go to like Indonesia for another Cisco conference. And I was just like in a really bad mood. And he looked at me and was like, you choose this life. And I was like, I went home that night and I don't think he knows about this, but like I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute, I do choose this life and I don't like it. And that's when I decided I was leaving Cisco. Like I love the impact of Cisco. I loved working there. I loved the people. I loved the employees, the customers. But like candidly, it was like wearing me way down. I was traveling too much. They didn't pay me enough. And I was like, wait, screw this. Like, I don't need to work here. Like I sold my company for a lot of money. Like I'm very rich. Like I could go do something else and I don't want to stop working, but like, he's right. So I think people have to remember, like you choose this life. And if you don't like what you're doing, you have the agency to do something else. And that's when I decided like, okay, I'm going to leave Cisco and do something else, either start another company or I didn't expect to become an investor, but I became an investor.
That's fantastic. That's like a fantastic piece of advice that you have the agency to change, you know, what you do. At the end of the day, you are choosing to do it.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story from yesterday.
Please, yeah.
I was talking to a founder who's been running his company for 11 years. Okay. And it's been a long, tough slog. And he kind of was like just calling to catch me up on what's happening. And we're investors in his company. And like, we don't care. His company's fine. It's like, it's not Anthropic, but like, it's fine, you know? And he thinks he can probably sell the company right now for $300 or $400 million. And I think because of the environment we're in, he's like, oh, it's just not very much money. I'm like, I don't know. Like you own a decent chunk of the company. Like it will change your life forever. And like your life, and like we now know this business will never become a huge business. It's like a pretty good business, but not a massive business. And it's just like, you should sell the company. Like, I don't care if you sell the company. It's not going to change our returns. Like, it doesn't, we own so little of the company, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But like, you're 11 years into this, you're not having fun anymore. You realize it's not going to become a big company unless you're going to pivot into something else. But like, you might as well just start a new company with a new cap table and like not 11 years of baggage. Just like you choose this life and you can choose to not do it anymore and just sell the business. Like, it's okay. And you'll make a lot of money. Like, sometimes people need to hear that perspective and just know, like, you don't have to keep doing this just because like you're doing it.
That's the DU motto. I think I'm going to send you something with you choose this life.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you an artifact with you choose this life.
Yeah. People forget they have agency.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, do something different.
I love that story. For younger, I guess, like, whether that's like investors coming up or younger entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs maybe, what advice would you give them on how to choose what to work on?
I think you have to, I mean, this is such a lame answer, but you have to work on something you're interested in. This doesn't happen to me as much anymore because I think parents realize that I'm a bad person to give advice to their kids because they would always be like, oh, David, you're successful. You should go talk to my kid. He's like struggling in college, figuring out what to do. And I would always be like, I don't know why you're doing computer science. It's like, it's just a stupid major.
Doesn't seem like you're interested in this.
It doesn't seem like you like it. Yeah, I don't really like it. And then they'd call me later like, wow, how could you say that to my kid? You were supposed to tell them that like computer science is the future. And this is before like, you know, Codex came out and all this. So now my advice have turned out to be really good. But like I always tell people, you have to do what you're interested in. And if you're really interested in something, you'll figure out a way to make it a business. And by the way, if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, that's okay too.
Yeah.
I remember a long time ago, my sister dated, and I didn't know this at the time, but she like dated a guy who kept trying to be like an investment banking and like trying to do this. Like, you should just be a teacher. Like, this guy like was designed and built and born to be like a father and a teacher. Like, that's all he should have done.
Did he end up being a teacher?
No. I think his parents put a lot of pressure on him to like do like consulting or banking or whatever. And like, he's miserable. My sister broke up with him this is a long time ago. He's a terrible guy. But anyway, I just think to myself, like, you have to do what you're actually supposed to do, not what someone else tells you to do. Because also, life is kind of more like checkers. It's not like chess. People that are like, well, I'm going to go to this school, then I'm going to work for 2 years at McKinsey, then I'm going to get my MBA at Stanford, and then I'm going to go start a company. And it's like, no. Life never works like that. Go just do something you like. And when you're presented with a fork in the road, just make the smartest decision based on the information you have. Talk to people. Make an intelligent decision, like set yourself up for success, but you cannot model things out like 5 moves in advance. It never works.
You know, funny you say that. Very early on in this career and venture, I got this advice from an absolute titan in the industry. The advice was more like chess, which was this.
How's it worked out like that?
I didn't take it.
Yeah,
so it worked out great.
Right. It never works. It's like people say these things like, oh, you should really make a plan, but like then you get punched in the face. Yeah, and you know, opportunity comes when you least expect it. And if you're too narrow-minded or too closed-minded to really be open to this opportunity, because you're like, oh no, my plan is I have to go to Stanford Business School in a year. Like, I can't go work at OpenAI. Well, then you missed out on this generational opportunity.
Even I guess like if you get too absorbed in your own ideas of how you want to do things, or even if there's a business you're wanting to start, if you get completely consumed by it, you might miss out on other opportunities life may present.
I mean, I ran a consumer cybersecurity company for 5 years until we pivoted to the enterprise. And you know, at some point I had to like wake up and say, wait a minute, why am I doing that? I choose this life. Like, why am I doing this? All these businesses want to pay us. I keep trying to build this consumer thing. They don't want to pay me anything. Like, maybe I should let people give me money.
Why did you go the consumer route first?
Well, we kind of thought that a consumer cybersecurity service would be really good because people really care. We thought, it turns out I'm wrong. I thought people cared about cybersecurity. They always talk about it. They want cybersecurity. You know, there was McAfee antivirus and these things.
Maybe you can also introduce the company for those who don't know.
OpenDNS was a cloud-delivered cybersecurity company. It blocked phishing sites and malware sites and all these things. It was very easy to manage and easy to deploy. You know, worked on all your devices. And it was great. But like, it turns out that people would rather buy a $5 Starbucks than pay $5 a month for cybersecurity. Businesses, on the other hand, don't care about the $5 Starbucks. They'd much rather pay for cybersecurity. And so at some point you have to just listen to the market and we say like, wait, we have great technology. We have great people, a great product. Let's just go build this for the people that actually want to give us money. I mean, this is like, you know, like again, part of being open-minded. A lot of founders have this idea of how their company will get built. It almost never works out that way. It's not linear. It doesn't happen. But you have to be open-minded to where the market tells you. People talk about product market fit. Sometimes you actually have to pay attention to, well, do I have product market fit, or like, am I building something that people actually want?
Do you, since we've touched on the company, I do have like a ton of questions on company building that, you know, I'd love to hear from you on. What should founders avoid? Do you have like a running list of things after going through that entire journey that are easy to avoid early on?
Yes, probably. I also have a list, like a secret list of things that I often say to founders that I swear it's for their benefit, but then they never believe me until it's too late. And then they're like, oh yeah, you were right. And like the number one is that it used to be very common for VCs to require founders to revest at financing rounds. So like that nobody could be more than 25% invested in a financing round. That's kind of gone away as the market's become much more founder friendly. But the reality is this is always a better move for founders, because there's almost always like one co-founder who was never pulling their weight. And you know, but now the person owns 20% of the company and they're fully vested. And it's like, look, if every financing round just revested people, then the founders who are building for the mission for the long term, they don't care about revesting because they're just going to invest it all back again anyway. But if someone has to leave the company, instead of leaving with 20% of the company, maybe they leave with 10% of the company or 7% of the company, or at least you get to have a negotiation about it. And it sounds like this is kind of like very like, you know, financially aggressive, but it actually allows you to use that equity to go hire new people for the next phase of the company.
Right.
And so there's lots of things that used to be normal in fundraising in Silicon Valley that are now just like totally gone. And they think that it's like, oh, I got it. Like I have a leg up now on the VC. Is like, I'm not going to do revesting. It's like, I don't care about your revesting. It's really for you. And then like what ends up happening is like 2 or 3 years later, there's like, oh wait, this co-founder like turns out has actually not been working for the last 2 years.
Almost always the case.
It's almost,
just so many times I hear about
I told you about revesting, but you said no, and I just said okay. But like now you wish you had done it. They're like, yeah, I wish I had done it. Always. Founder revesting. I've never met a founder that's like, oh no, we did revesting and I regret it. Never happened. Because you can always put these little carve outs, like in an M&A situation, you get back all your vesting, whatever, it doesn't matter. So that's one. And then you asked about things that founders should not do. The most important thing for a company is to hire the best talent, bar none. And I think that if a founder does not understand what it means to have an incredibly high bar for talent, they have to go figure that out as quickly as possible, because the biggest thing that wastes time and money in a company is hiring the wrong people. And I have a founder recently that we invested in who showed me the resume of a guy who spent like the last 14 years at Google. Okay. Not even an engineering role. And I was just like, there's just no way this guy's going to be good. Like I've just seen enough people. I'm like, look, I said, to be nice, I'm going to say 99 times out of 100, when someone has spent like 14 years at a company and then they want to go join as like employee number 3 at your company, I'll say like 99 times out of 100, it never works. But the reality is I'm being nice. It's actually 100 out of 100. It's never worked. Maybe there's one example somewhere, but I've never seen it work. And, you know, unless the person's really a founder, but not a first employee, because they just expect big company things. And they've also made so much money at these companies. And so
they're good for, but a different stage
of the company. Yeah. Maybe even when you're 100 people.
Yeah.
And you actually have like an HR department and an IT department. And so I think that the high bar for talent cascades into multiple things. One is like, make sure you hire someone that's really got the grittiness and the grind. Like, again, if you tell me that your first hire that you're making after we just seed invested in the company needs to make $450,000 a year, you've hired the wrong person. Like that is not what employee number 3 needs. They're like, oh no, they also need a full benefits plan. That's really important. And we can set those things up. Those are important, but like probably not the number one issue for your number 3, your first hire, you know, the number 3 employee at your company. They're just focused on the wrong things. You have to remember, Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, took a bunch of cinder blocks and took a door from Home Depot, and that was his desk. Like that was it. And so have a high bar for talent and have people that are like the right fit for the right phase. You just cannot fix these things later. Once you hire the wrong people, it totally F's up your culture. You can never get it back. And you can never hire, like, you know, I know I'm not the first person to say this, but like B people will hire C people and C people will hire D people if you manage to get C people. And it's just so hard to fix that once you get it wrong. And so the most important thing a founder can do is understand what great talent looks like and magnetically attract that talent. Again, people complain about Elon all the time. The best people in the world go work for Elon. There is something about him that is magnetic. The mission is huge. He demands excellence from people. He works people very hard with high expectations, but yet the best people continue to want to work for him. And so he has figured out how to assess talent and magnetically attract them to his company. That's number one. Then the number 2 thing is like not running out of money. It sounds really stupid, but the number one reason why companies fail is they run out of money.
Yeah.
People always forget this.
Yeah.
They think fundraising is always easy. It's not always easy.
No.
So you have to have some level of financial discipline in building your company.
How do you sell an idea on a paper when you're going out for that first round?
Tell me how the world is going to change when this works. Like, why is it going to be big? Again, you want to build motors? Fine. That's like cool. But tell me how the world will change. How it changes the posture of American national security to be able to make motors in this country, and why it will transform manufacturing, not just in conflict time, but in peacetime. Why it will enable us to build our own modern day version of Shenzhen because we start with motors here in this country. Like, tell me the big vision.
Is it the ability for them to draw out that detailed vision, that map? Like,
yeah, if I draw it out, it's dangerous. If a
Yeah.
VC is more excited about the idea and how big it
and
can
they're
get
drawing it out.
than
Yeah.
the founder, that's bad.
Yeah.
I think founders, part of magnetically attracting talent and magnetically attracting capital is telling a great story. And you have to tell me a story about how the world is going to work when what you do works.
Were you always good at storytelling?
I think I've always been good at storytelling.
Well, what are some ingredients of good storytelling?
And I think, by the
Yeah.
way, I should add a caveat, which is that, I think founders sometimes, especially in frothy markets like we're in now, they lose track of the difference between storytelling and lying. And it is an important distinction. What I tell founders, like, you have to tell the truth attractively, but you have to tell the truth. But you can tell it as attractively as you want.
Yeah.
But you cannot lie. And you can tell us what your vision for the future is, but you can't make up your numbers in the past. You can't make up facts that aren't true about your business. First of all, it's illegal. But second of all, it's unethical.
Yeah.
And I think that, but storytelling it's really a virtuous motion. And there's one way to improve on storytelling, which I'll get to in a second, but it helps you attract talent. It helps you attract capital. It helps the market understand what you do and get people excited and interested in you. Again, Elon is a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And again, that makes him great at magnetically attracting talent and magnetically attracting capital. I used to run a program at OpenDNS called Toastmasters. I don't know, have you ever heard of Toastmasters?
Yes. Yeah.
So Toastmasters has been around for decades,
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah.
And it's like these little programs in every city. There's many chapters. And you just learn how to do impromptu public speaking much better. They give you a topic, you have to speak about it. It improves your debate skills. Lots of people that go into like high school debate end up being good storytellers.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that background, you can go sign up for a local Toastmasters chapter. I think it's either free or next to free, like $10, or something.
And then there's a local chapter everywhere.
There's a local chapter everywhere. Actually, we started a chapter at OpenDNS because we had so many people interested, and we brought in the real Toastmasters group to run it. And it was transformative. People that were like engineers that thought maybe one day I want to be a product manager, but I'm not very confident speaking in front of a team, speaking in front of a group. I don't know how to articulate my ideas. Toastmasters was transformative for some of these people.
And then probably made the sales leaders more effective at their job, right?
We encouraged everyone who wanted to improve their public speaking to do it. And it was really a great program. And I encourage people now, if you have great ideas, but you can't articulate them, you can't attract talent, you can't attract capital, maybe go look at Toastmasters or one of these other things. I also used to give people a book called Writing That Works. It was written by a big famous advertising executive that basically summarizes to like write at an 8th grade level. And it's very effective.
Simplify. Yeah. The best communication strategy is be as simple as possible.
Yeah. Succinct.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is way harder than one thinks. Yeah. I actually like this idea. I debated until college, and it was primarily to polish my storytelling skills. That's what I was aiming for. And then so I started hosting these dinners here around some single topic debates.
Oh yeah.
And that has been like great for, just succinctly defining your position. That's what it helps you do, right? Like you have to defend your position, but you only have 2 minutes on the floor.
Totally.
Or a minute on the floor.
I think it also makes you a better listener.
Yeah. You have to be very sharp. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, some people listen to respond, some people listen to understand. And I think that the more time you do public speaking and things like that, you actually get better at listening to really understand and not just listening to respond.
Doing 2-hour podcasts has helped with that too.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure.
You brought up this concept of magnetism as a trait in founders a lot. And I guess like one part of it is storytelling. What are some other traits you would define as like what else makes a founder magnetic? Is it like, I'm sure it's not just, having 20,000 followers on Twitter, right? Like, or being a really good poster. Right. There's probably a lot of things.
I think, by the way, I take the magnetic thing a little bit from my partner, Alex Rampel, who first told me about this term. So I'll give him credit for it. But I think the other thing is you really have to have deep domain expertise, especially if you want to attract the best people. And you can get that. You can acquire it. You don't have to have been a rocket scientist for 20 years to go build rockets. But you have to want to learn a lot about how rockets work, how rocket propellant works, how they come together, how you get into space, how orbit works. And look, in the era that we live in with AI and ChatGPT and Codex and things, you can get information assimilation happening at just incredible levels of speed and bandwidth. You know, my personal ability to ingest information now is higher than it's ever been. And a lot of it is thanks to AI. I just say, like, I throw in a paper that's 50 pages and say, give me the summary. No, I want more. Give me a little bit more detail. No, give me a little bit more detail. What else should I be thinking about? I just talk to the AI constantly to get smarter and smarter. And, but I think you have to be able to have deep domain expertise and not be kind of like, I would never open up an auto body shop because I know nothing about cars. I could learn a lot about cars. I don't care about cars.
But you're genuinely interested.
But if you're genuinely interested,
back to that interest.
Right, I could learn a lot about cars, and I'll bet, because I'm a smart person, I could learn a lot more than even a lot of people that work on cars. But like, if I'm going to open an auto body shop, you have to know a lot about auto body shops. You can't just be like that. Like, I meet sometimes these finance people that are like, I'm going to create a search fund and I'm not going to go buy car washes. I'm like, but do you really want to run a car wash? Like, do you know anything about car washes? Like, I don't know. Maybe they're like, no, but the business is so good that it throws off cash. The economics are good. I'm like, yeah, but then you run a car wash. Like, is that what you want to do? That what you want to be the best at? And you have to want to be the best at it. You have to have before you deep even knowledge.
Discuss those ideas, you need to be deep down that rabbit hole. And it doesn't matter if you come from the industry or you're deep down in that rabbit hole. It goes back to what
we talked about with how you advance your career. You have to be interested.
Yeah.
You have to be interested in these things if you want to be a spectacular and extraordinary person.
Well, that's a very fair point. But it also answers another question I had around, you know, I agree that SpaceX and Tesla, Elon companies are great training grounds for founders who are going to build industrial startups or who are going to build for these critical industry sectors, mostly involving hardware, or who have to deal with the government. Palantir is another pipeline. Anduril is another now emerging pipeline. But these are what I would call as modern credentials. Yes, you're not looking at probably Harvard or MIT or, you know, some of these other places, but these are modern credentials for a specific type of company building. But how do you look beyond these? I guess then you're left to judge domain expertise in some way.
I would say that people that work at those companies are doing the most important thing, which is they're seeing what startup success looks like and how to do things the right way. A lot of times I hear other people say, oh, you should go get startup experience. But getting bad startup experience, like, you learn a little bit. You don't learn nothing. You learn a little bit. But it's not nearly as good as working at a company that's successful and you see what success looks like. Again, that's what helps you find what a high bar for talent looks like. Some of the people that leave Anduril have such an incredibly high bar for talent because the company has a high bar for talent. People that leave Tesla, it's not just that they understand how do you build a factory quickly, or how do you decide that one day we're behind on production and everybody from the accounting intern to the guy in engineering is now working on the factory line because we got to catch up. Like, that's what real company leadership does. Like, you see these things and you see what success looks like and you're like, we're going to do that when I build my company. So it is really the modern day credential. I agree, but it's because they're seeing what success looks like. They're seeing what innovation looks like, what the art of doing the impossible and making it possible looks like. So I think those are great places. And it is important. This is part of this, like, you know, you choose this life. If you're grinding it out at a company where it's not working and you've lost faith in the leadership and you don't think the company's going to work, it is okay to be like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go work somewhere successful.
Yeah.
Someone yesterday texted me and said, I have a job offer from OpenAI. I don't know if I should take it or not. I'm like, well, what's your other offer?
Yeah.
No offer.
No.
Yeah. And I was like, what do you think? Like, this is not rocket science. This is not chess. Just like take the job at OpenAI. It is a great company.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you have a job offer from Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever right now, and you don't have an alternative that you think is better, go take it. Like, this is not hard.
That is great career advice. Do you so how do you evaluate credentials, or like how do you find signal beyond that? Because even in this case, you've mentioned I
ask people about their lives. How did you grow up? Why did you study what you studied?
Right.
What brought you to America?
Yeah.
What did your parents do? I mean, I hate to say it, but those things are often very, very instructive and informative. Yeah, they're very telling.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my father died when I was young. My mother worked 2 jobs. and I just want to live a better life. I want to create a better life than I had.
You're trying to figure out what puts the chip on the shoulder and how deep it goes.
That's right. What motivates them.
Yeah.
And I will say you learn a lot from these. And then I would say references. We do lots of references. I hate to say it, but I could probably do all my hiring if I never even talked to the candidate, but I only did references. Now, I don't think they would ever accept a job because they wouldn't even know who I am because I never talked to them. But just from a purely formulaic standpoint, references are so much more important. Because again, a lot of people are good storytellers, and they can be bullshitters. But when you do references, the truth always comes out. It's like, this was the best manager I ever had. I don't care what company they're working for. I will quit what I'm doing. I would love to work with them again. Or you hear in the reference, oh yeah, they were a wonderful manager. They really came into the office every day, like always was on top of things, very responsive on email. Oh, would you go work for them again? Well, I really like the job I have. I don't know. It depends on what they're doing. It's like, that is a terrible reference.
Yeah.
If you have that, like, if you could go work for the best person you ever worked for again, like you will quit what you're doing to go work for them again. That's what a great reference sounds like. So references really are.
So at that point, you're not interested in why they're saying it. It's the fact that they're saying it means there's something off.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. They're like, oh, I just like moved into my new apartment. It's like, oh. Again, for the best people and the best opportunities, nobody says that. They just say, oh my God, I would do anything to work for them again. That's what a great reference sounds like. So when we look at these credentials, yes, the company they work for matters, but the references matter even more. And I don't care where their degree is from, if they have one.
That is such a good point. Well, we covered a lot. I think it was such a good conversation, and we got to cover so much ground. And I'd love to do part 2 at some point. But just to wrap it up, as we're approaching the end, if you were to do a government sales 101, or what would that include? And why do you think LOIs are an anti-signal?
Did I ever say LOIs are an anti-signal?
You did.
Maybe
you didn't say it in those exact words. You're like, you don't really.
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. Yeah.
I think the challenge with American Dynamism companies that sell to the government is you have to be able to do sales, government affairs, regulatory work, while still building your company and doing all these things all at once, right? So it's not just one motion. This is why I like the dual use companies. I'm like, dual use at the same time? Maybe dual use later. I would say you have to learn how to find your customer. Just like in enterprise sales where you'd have to dial for dollars and find who is the champion, who has the budget authority. The same thing is true. And in fact, in the government, it can often be easier because a lot of times the person with the budget authority is published. You know who you can literally look them up and find their name in a directory in the budget and say, oh, this is the program executive for this program, the acquisitions officer for this program. I can call them up and just say, this is what I'm building. Do you want to talk to me? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I would love to talk. That's exactly what I care about. It is sometimes easier to sell to the government. Now you have to have something that works. You have to be able to deliver it. You have to make sure Congress appropriates money for it. And you have to do lots of other work, but it is just enterprise sales on steroids.
Enterprise sales on steroids.
Yeah. Well, with enterprise sales, you can start with smaller companies and move up. When you sell to the government, you're generally starting with a very large set of customers. But even in the Pentagon, you can start with Special Operations Command. They'll buy 10 of things, and then you can go to the Army and sell them 1,000 of something.
Or you can fund your R&D through DIU.
That's right.
Similar
and they will open doors for you as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's lots of pathways to win in the government. The question is, and we help companies with this all the time, is finding the right doors to open that won't waste your time.
With some more time, maybe, and we'll put on a whiteboard behind us, and like Drakesh does in one of those, and we'll do a government sales 101 if you're open to it.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be because you have. So I think you have a lot of experience and you've articulated it in really interesting ways previously.
That's right.
You brought up you brought up 2 books so far, right?
I don't know. Writing that works.
Writing in the works.
What else did I say?
What in the Dictator?
Oh, the Dictator's Handbook.
The Dictator's Handbook. Yeah, you brought up 2 books.
But there's so many good books I could recommend.
Is there another book you'd like to mention that had a transformative impact on your life?
Actually, Steve Blank's book, who now runs Hacking for Defense at Stanford.
Yeah.
But he used to be a CEO and a product leader, and he was like the original like MVP
lean
guy, lean startup guy before Eric Ries took it, with permission. But he wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which was an amazing book about how to build products and do the MVP.
I've not heard of that one.
I know. That's actually how I got to know who he was from the 4 Steps to the Epiphany, because he ran a company called Epiphany back in the .com boom. And then later, like my life collided with him again because he now does hacking for defense.
Yeah,
and he's like a huge defense
He's
guy.
very deep in defense. Yeah.
But originally he was like writing about how to start a company and how to build products. It was amazing.
But what did that change about?
That was before the lean startup, before this idea of minimum viable product. I mean, he invented all these things.
Right.
He invented the idea of minimum viable product, and then, again, still books that matter from like a market standpoint is like Crossing the Chasm. And this matters even for selling the government of like, how do you find your early adopters and then cross the chasm to get widespread adoption?
What is something you've changed your mind on 180 in the last 6 months or so? Or even a year?
The last thing I've changed my mind on 180. Oh. I celebrated my 2-year wedding anniversary yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we have like a little 14-month-old boy. And it took me a long time to find my wife. So this is not something that I changed my mind on 180, but like not in the last year, maybe the last few years, which is that nothing makes you more focused on your work and your family than getting married and having a family, I think. I underestimated like my product. Like I watch far less YouTube videos than I used to. Cause like now I just want to like finish my work, go home, be with my baby, do emails, go be with my baby. It's very satisfying. It's very gratifying. And people used to say that to me and I would ignore them and be like, no, I just want to build. And those are important. I'm glad I did that in that phase of my life, but I'm very happy to be in this phase of my life.
Is there a favorite, when founders meet you to spend time with you and when you're spending time with them, is there, a favorite go-to dinner place or lunch place in New York? Or is there a favorite cuisine that's comfort food?
For efficiency, I like when people just come to the office because I can really.
I can tell because we're recording here,
right? Because I can have as many meetings as possible.
Yeah.
That said, I will generally eat. I prefer ethnic food. I like Southeast Asian food. I like Indian food, Middle Eastern food. I'll eat basically anything with flavor.
All right, awesome. Next time we come rolling into the office, we'll come with Southeast Asian and Indian food.
Perfect.
All right.
Sounds great.
David, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Great to be here.